Hello, welcome to Green Tea Tales. Today's story is about a young woman who enjoys her job but have no life outside of her work. Her boss pushes her to attend a life balance class. My question to you, are you willing to step back from something you really enjoy for something new in your life? Leave a comment below. Rudy adjusted her glasses, sighed, and leaned back in her chair. The clock read 11:47 p.m. The muted city lights outside her office window, a stark contrast to the buzzing thoughts in her mind. Most of her colleagues had gone home hours ago, leaving the floor eerily silent. But silence suited Rudy. It gave her space to think, to strategize, to win. At 32, Rudy Mason was a legal powerhouse. As one of the youngest partners at Baxter & Associates, her meteoric rise was fueled by an unyielding work ethic and razor-sharp intelligence. It wasn't uncommon to find her poring over case files into the early hours of the morning, fueled by nothing but caffeine and ambition. "Miss Mason, you need to go home," her assistant Janice had pleaded earlier that evening, peeking into her office. "You've been here for 16 hours. "I'll sleep when the Simmons case is resolved," Rudy had replied without looking up. Her tone was clipped, professional, and utterly dismissive. Her boss, Mr. Baxter, shared Janice's concerns. A gruff man with a soft spot for his star employees, he'd watched Rudy throw herself into her career with reckless abandon. And while he admired her drive, he also knew the cost of burnout. The next morning, he confronted her in the hallway. "Rudy, we need to talk." Her stomach tightened. Was this about the Simmons deposition? Had she overlooked something? But his next words stunned her. "I've signed you up for a work-life balance workshop," he said. Rudy blinked. "A what?" "It's mandatory," he added firmly. "Start Saturday. Don't even think about skipping." Rudy opened her mouth to protest, but quickly shut it. This wasn't a debate she could win. She spent the rest of the day fuming, imagining the kind of cheesy, unproductive event she was about to endure. Her time was too valuable for mindfulness exercises and breathing techniques. Little did she know, the workshop would be a turning point, not just for her career, but for her life. Saturday arrived with an air of dread. Rudy entered the community center, her sharp heels clicking against the worn tile floor. She scanned the room with barely disguised disdain. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, illuminating a circle of mismatched chairs. A small group of professionals milled about, sipping coffee and exchanging awkward pleasantries. In the center of it all stood Brad Marshall, the instructor. He was tall, with a sun-kissed complexion and a grin so relaxed it bordered on irritating. His casual demeanor, jeans, sneakers, and a rolled-up plaid shirt, seemed out of place in a room full of Type A personalities. Rudy took one look at him and decided she didn't like him. "Welcome, everyone." Brad's voice was warm, his enthusiasm almost palpable. "I'm Brad, and over the next 6 weeks, we're going to learn how to work smarter, not harder." Rudy crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair, her skepticism practically radiating off her. As Brad launched into his opening spiel, peppering his speech with jokes and anecdotes, Rudy's frown deepened. She wasn't here for humor. She was here because her boss had forced her to be. During a break, Brad approached her. "Rudy Mason, right?" he asked, his tone friendly, but knowing. "Your boss told me you might be a tough nut to crack." "I'm not here to be cracked," she replied sharply. "I'm here because I have no choice." Brad chuckled unfazed. "Fair enough, but I've seen it before. People like you come in skeptical, leave surprised. Let's see how it goes." Despite herself, Rudy couldn't help but notice his confidence. He wasn't pushy or overbearing, just persistent. Annoyingly so. By the end of the session, she still wasn't convinced, but a small part of her, buried under layers of cynicism, was intrigued. By the third session, Rudy's resistance had started to wane. Brad's exercises were simple yet surprisingly effective. One assignment in particular struck a nerve. Write a letter to someone you'd been neglecting. At first, Rudy dismissed the task as sentimental nonsense. But as she sat in her office that evening, staring at a blank page, she thought about her family. Her parents had always supported her, cheering her on from the sidelines. Her younger sister, Lily, had tried to stay in touch, but Rudy's focus on work had driven a wedge between them. With a deep breath, Rudy began to write. The words came slowly at first. Soon they poured out, raw and honest. She apologized for her absence, her neglect, and expressed a desire to reconnect. The next morning, she hit send before she could overthink it. To her surprise, her mother replied within hours. "We miss you, sweetheart. Come for dinner this weekend. It's been too long." Saturday arrived with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Her parents' home was as warm and inviting as she remembered, filled with the smell of her mother's lasagna. Lily greeted her with a playful jab. Look who finally decided to show up. Dinner was a revelation. They talked and laughed, reminiscing about old times and sharing updates on their lives. For the first time in years, Rudy felt connected, not to a case or a client, but to her family. It was a feeling she hadn't realized she'd missed. Rudy's progress didn't go unnoticed. Brad made a point of checking in with her after each session, and their conversations grew increasingly personal. She found herself looking forward to his easy humor and thoughtful insights. One evening, after a particularly lively class, Brad walked her to her car. "So how's the balance thing working out for you?" he asked, his tone teasing but genuinely curious. "It's better than I expected," Rudy admitted. "Not that I'd ever say that in front of the group." Brad laughed. "Your secret's safe with me. By the way, there's a great jazz bar downtown. You should check it out sometime." Rudy raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting I take a night off work?" "Absolutely," Brad said with a grin. "And who knows, you might even enjoy it." Rudy did take his advice, venturing out to the jazz bar alone. The experience was awkward at first, but by the end of the night she found herself tapping her foot to the music, a small smile on her lips. When she told Brad about it the next week, his face lit up. "See? You're getting the hang of it," he said, his eyes twinkling. Next step, dating. Rudy laughed, but the thought lingered. Her first few attempts were predictably awkward. A coffee date with a guy who wouldn't stop talking about his CrossFit routine, and a dinner date with a man obsessed with cryptocurrency. But through it all, Brad was her confidant, his advice both practical and comforting. Eventually, Rudy realized she didn't need to look any further. The connection she'd been searching for had been standing in front of her all along. One evening, as they walked through the park after class, Brad reached for her hand. Rudy hesitated for only a moment before lacing her fingers with his. As Rudy began to open herself up to change, she found herself increasingly drawn to Brad's easygoing demeanor and knack for cutting through her defenses. Their post-class conversations stretched longer each time, evolving from casual banter to something more substantial. Brad had a way of asking just the right questions. Not prying, but enough to make Rudy pause and think, "Do you ever miss it?" she asked him one evening, after the group had discussed strategies for disconnecting from work after hours. The intensity, the feeling of constantly chasing something bigger. Brad leaned back in his chair, considering her question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "I loved my job, but it wasn't sustainable. I was so focused on success that I didn't realize I was running on fumes until my body gave out." She tilted her head, intrigued. "What happened?" Brad hesitated, his expression softening. "I collapsed during a client presentation. Turns out a combination of stress, exhaustion, and neglecting basic self-care can do that to you." He gave a self-deprecating laugh. "I ended up in the hospital for a week. It was a wake-up call." Rudy stared at him, struck by his honesty. "And that's when you decided to teach balance?" "Something like that." Brad's eyes met hers, steady and open. "I realized I wanted to help people avoid the mistakes I made. Life's too short to spend it running on empty." For the first time, Rudy felt a flicker of admiration, not just for Brad's philosophy, but for the vulnerability he carried with such ease. She'd spent so long shielding herself from others, convinced that admitting weakness would make her less capable. Brad's willingness to share his struggles made her wonder if strength could look different than she'd imagined. Their interactions grew more personal as the weeks went on. Brad seemed to have a sixth sense for when she needed a nudge or a distraction. When she mentioned her disastrous dates, he didn't just laugh. He offered thoughtful advice, always with a hint of teasing. "Maybe you need to try something different," he suggested one evening, his tone playful. "Like meeting someone at a pottery class or a farmer's market. That way, you know they're at least semi-normal." "Or I could just stay single forever," Rudy countered dryly, though the corner of her mouth twitched with amusement. "Sure, that's an option," Brad said, grinning. "But I'd bet against it." Despite her reluctance to admit it, Brad's confidence in her was infectious. When she hesitated to open up about her struggles with reconnecting with her family, he didn't push. Instead, he shared stories about his own imperfect relationships, his parents' worries about his unconventional career, and his younger brother's sarcastic quips that masked genuine support. "You remind me of my brother," he told her one evening as they strolled through the park after class. "He's stubborn, ambitious, and terrible at asking for help." Rudy smirked. "I'm guessing he loves that comparison." "Oh, he hates it," Brad said, laughing. "But I admire it. That determination? It's what makes you capable of changing, even when it's hard." It was moments like these, unexpected and disarming, that brought down Rudy's walls. She found herself seeking out Brad's perspective, not just in class, but in her life. When she struggled to let go of a case she'd handed off to a junior associate, she texted Brad late at night. "How do you stop worrying about something you can't control?" His response was quick. "Remind yourself you've done your part. Then find something better to focus on, like sleep or chocolate." The next day, he handed her a bar of dark chocolate with a grin, to help with the worry. "Thanks," she said, rolling her eyes. But later, when she broke off a square after dinner, she found herself smiling. Their connection was growing, undeniable yet unspoken. It lingered in the small moments, the way Brad's hand brushed hers when he passed her a notebook, the way Rudy's laughter came more easily when he was around. And when Brad reached for her hand in the park that evening, Rudy didn't pull away. Instead, she tightened her grip, anchoring herself in the warmth of his touch. Rudy had grown used to her post-class chats with Brad. They had developed a rhythm, light teasing, quiet honesty, the occasional flirtation that hovered just shy of the line. She didn't label it. Whatever it was, it had become her favorite part of the week. That's why she noticed right away when the rhythm shifted. Her name was Carrie. She was new to the class, mid-30s, well-dressed, confident in a breezy, curated way. She introduced herself with a bright smile and a firm handshake and immediately gravitated toward Brad. During the next session, Carrie laughed a little too loudly at Brad's jokes and volunteered for every demonstration. She lingered after class, asking questions that veered suspiciously far from the subject of work-life balance. Rudy told herself it was nothing. Brad was just being polite. But by the third week of Carrie's enthusiastic participation, something twisted in her chest every time Brad leaned in to answer her or chuckled at something she said. Rudy couldn't focus. Her notes were a mess. She barely remembered the exercise they were supposed to practice that week. She managed to hold it together until she got home. Then she did something she hadn't done in a long time. She called her sister. Lily answered on the third ring. "Well, is this a ghost calling? Rudy Mason, is that you?" "Very funny," Rudy said dryly. "I needed to vent. This must be serious. What happened? Courtroom disaster? Janice forgot your lunch?" Rudy sighed. "There's this woman in my class, Carrie. She's been monopolizing Brad." "Brad?" Lily asked innocently. "As in Brad, wellness guru Brad? Maybe you should relax, Brad?" Rudy groaned. "Yes, that Brad. Oh, do you like him?" "No, I mean," Rudy paused, flustered. "I don't know, she's annoying, always flirting, always laughing at everything he says. She doesn't even try to hide it." Lily burst out laughing. "Oh my God, Rudy, you're jealous." "I'm not jealous," Rudy snapped, then added, "I'm observationally irritated, sure, and I eat salads for fun." Lily's tone softened. "You like him, you're just too afraid to admit it." Rudy fell silent, caught off guard by how right that felt. "Well," Lily continued, "maybe it's time you stop pretending he's just your class instructor and start figuring out what you really want. Because if you don't, someone like Carrie might beat you to it." That thought sat with Rudy long after the call ended. The next time she saw Brad, she wasn't quite sure how to act. But she was sure of one thing now. Whatever this was between them, it mattered more than she'd let herself believe. Rudy wasn't the type to sulk. She prided herself on being direct, in control, untouchable. But ever since Carrie had started making herself comfortable at Brad's side, arriving early, sitting beside him, touching his arm when she laughed, something had shifted, and Rudy hated how much she noticed. She began withdrawing from the class without realizing it. She sat a little farther back, stopped lingering after. Her answers became short, perfunctory. When Brad cracked a joke, she didn't laugh, even when it was genuinely funny. She even skipped one session entirely, citing a trial prep conflict, though Brad probably knew it was a lie. The following week, she arrived late and sat quietly in the back, scrolling through emails while Brad led the discussion on sustainable boundaries. It wasn't that she didn't care. She just didn't know where she stood anymore. And watching Carrie beam at Brad like they were co-teaching a rom-com was too much. After class, Rudy tried to leave quickly, but Brad was waiting by the door. "Rudy," he said, stepping in front of her. "Can we talk?" "Not really," she said, brushing past him. "Hey." His voice softened. "You've been distant. What's going on?" Before she could answer, Carrie appeared. Flawless timing, as always. "Brad, oh sorry, didn't mean to interrupt." She smiled brightly, then turned to Rudy, completely oblivious. "Great session today, right? Brad's so insightful." Rudy forced a tight smile. "I'm sure he is. Look, I'll let you two get back to whatever." Brad's brow furrowed. "Rudy, wait, what do you mean?" She stepped back, folding her arms. "I mean, your girlfriend clearly wants your attention. Maybe focus on what she needs from you instead of chasing after people who clearly aren't interested in competing." The moment the words left her mouth, the tension in the hallway shifted. Brad blinked. "Wait, what?" Rudy laughed bitterly, trying to push past the lump in her throat. "It's fine, Brad. You don't owe me anything. I shouldn't have expected." "Rudy, Carrie's not my girlfriend," he said, cutting her off, his voice low and serious. She froze. "What?" "I'm not dating Carrie," he said again, slower this time. "She's just a participant, like everyone else. I've been trying to talk to you because I've noticed something's wrong." Carrie stood awkwardly between them, clearly stunned. "Oh," she said. "I didn't realize." "No, it's okay," Brad said gently, nodding to her. "Would you give us a minute?" Carrie nodded and quietly slipped away, leaving them in the quiet hallway. Rudy felt suddenly foolish, her arms dropping to her sides. "I thought." Brad took a cautious step closer. "You thought I was with her, and that's why you've been pulling away." She didn't answer, but the look on her face said everything. He exhaled, not frustrated, not smug, just understanding. "Rudy, I've been interested in you since probably week 2. I thought I was being obvious." She looked down, struggling to reconcile everything, her assumptions, her jealousy, her feelings. "I didn't want to assume, and I guess I did anyway." "Then let's stop assuming," he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, "and start talking." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rudy, voice quiet but firm, said, "Okay, let's talk." The next day, Brad found Carrie in the cafe across from the community center, sipping something pink and frothy with a book cracked open in front of her. She looked up as he approached, and a sheepish smile spread across her face. "I figured you might come find me," she said, folding the book closed. Brad slid into the seat across from her. "Yeah, I wanted to talk about Rudy." Carrie raised a hand before he could continue. "Let me start. I owe you both an apology." Brad blinked. "You do?" She nodded. "I kind of knew I was flirting. Okay, I totally knew. You're handsome and warm, and every other guy in my life has been either emotionally unavailable or obsessed with their crypto portfolio." Brad gave a small chuckle but stayed quiet. "But," she continued, "I honestly didn't see anything happening between you and Rudy. I thought she was just here for the program, kind of distant, you know?" Brad leaned back, his gaze steady. "She was distant, at first. But it's because she doesn't let people in easily. And then somewhere along the line, she started letting me in." Carrie's smile softened. "And I barged in without realizing it." "You didn't do anything malicious," Brad said gently. "But I think Rudy assumed we were involved, and that pushed her back into her shell." Carrie winced. "I didn't mean to cause any problems." Brad smiled. "I know, and I appreciate you saying this." She nodded, looking genuinely contrite. "I'll give you 2 space, and for what it's worth, she's lucky. You're the good kind." Later that evening, Brad found Rudy in the park where they often walked after class. She was sitting on a bench, her posture a little too straight, as if bracing for something. He sat beside her, close but not touching. "Carrie and I talked," he said. Rudy looked away, eyes fixed on a group of kids playing in the distance. "Let me guess. She apologized for flirting with someone who was clearly too noble to be interested in anyone else." Brad gave a low chuckle. "Something like that. She didn't realize there was something between us, which, to be fair, we haven't exactly defined." Rudy crossed her arms. I guess I'm not great at being obvious. You're also not great at being open, Brad added gently. She flinched, not because he was wrong, but because he was right. I don't know how to be, she said finally. I've spent years burying things. Dating felt like something for people who had time. Or emotional bandwidth. I always told myself I didn't need it. Brad stayed quiet, giving her space. I'm scared I'll mess it up, she whispered. That I'll be bad at it. Too guarded. Too everything. Brad turned to her, his voice low. Then let's be bad at it together. You don't have to have all the answers, Rudy. I'm not asking for perfection, just honesty. Rudy hesitated. Then she looked at him, really looked at him. Okay, she said, voice trembling just slightly. I'll try. Brad reached for her hand. She let him take it. And for the first time, Rudy wasn't trying to get somewhere. She was simply sitting beside someone, heart open, trying to figure it out together. For a while, things between Rudy and Brad were exactly what she hadn't realized she'd been craving. Simple, steady, and filled with warmth. It started small. A new high-profile case landed on Rudy's desk. The kind of complex, headline-making lawsuit that could cement her status as one of the city's top attorneys. Rudy told Brad she just needed to dig in for a few days. He understood. Of course he did. But then one postponed date turned into 2, then 3. Each time she canceled, her texts were polite but vague. Swamped. Court prep is brutal. Rain check? So sorry. Late deposition came up. Can we push dinner to next week? Next week's looking better. Hopefully. Brad had seen this version before, the focused, driven powerhouse who could conquer any challenge with a full calendar and an even fuller coffee mug. He admired that part of her. Loved it, even. But this was something else. This wasn't balance. This was her shutting down. He tried calling. She didn't pick up. He tried showing up at her office with lunch. Janice told him Rudy had locked herself in a conference room all day. So Brad did what he didn't want to do. He gave her space. And Rudy? She told herself it was temporary, that once the case was under control, she'd call him, that he'd understand. He always did. But deep down, she knew the truth. The following Saturday, Rudy sat at her parents' kitchen table, picking at a slice of coffee cake while her sister Lily scrolled on her phone and her mom hummed as she made tea. Brad texted me, Lily said casually, not looking up. Asked if you were okay. Rudy stiffened. You're talking to Brad now? He sent a meme of a stressed-out cat saying Rudy, probably. So yeah, we talk. Their mother looked up. Is he the nice young man who brought flowers when you came for dinner? Yes, Rudy mumbled, cheeks warming. Lily locked her phone and leaned forward. Why are you ghosting him? I'm not ghosting, Rudy said defensively. I'm just busy. You're always busy, her mom said gently. Even when you were little, you were always doing 10 things at once. But lately, you looked happy, lighter, like someone finally got through to you. Rudy stared at her fork, twisting it over and over. I don't know how to do this, she said finally. This case, it's huge, important, and with Brad, it's not just a fun thing, it's real, which makes it scary. Her voice cracked slightly. I like him, too much probably, and I can't mess this up, so I did what I always do. I buried myself in work, and now I'm starting to realize I wasn't just avoiding him, I was avoiding the idea of a relationship. Lily softened. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're just building walls, again. Their mom sat beside her and took her hand. Honey, relationships aren't perfect. They're messy. They scare you because they matter, but you don't have to do it alone, and you don't have to be perfect. Rudy swallowed hard. I don't know how to be open all the time. Sometimes I want to run. And sometimes, Lily said, you have to run toward something, not away from it. Rudy stared at the coffee cake. Then stood up suddenly. Where are you going? Her mother asked. Rudy grabbed her coat and keys. To stop running. The sky was overcast as Rudy drove across town, the kind of moody gray that made everything feel heavier, more fragile. She'd barely slept the night before, lying awake as her sister's words echoed in her head. You don't run because you're scared of him. You run because you're scared of being seen. Now, standing in front of Brad's building, her heart pounded so hard it felt like it might bruise her ribs. She almost turned back twice, but something stronger than fear kept her feet rooted to the pavement. Hope, maybe, or the tiny flicker of self-belief that had been growing since she met him. She rang the buzzer. The silence before his voice came through made her stomach twist. Hello? It's me. she said, Rudy. A pause. Then, come up. By the time she reached his door, Brad was already there, opening it with a mix of surprise and guarded hope. He looked like he hadn't shaved in a few days, like he hadn't expected to see her anytime soon. But his eyes still held that same calm warmth she'd come to rely on. I was wondering when you'd show up, he said softly. I wasn't sure I would, she replied, her voice trembling. He stepped aside to let her in. The familiar scent of coffee and cedar greeted her as she entered his apartment. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then, all at once, it spilled out. I'm sorry, she said, for disappearing, for pulling back, for using work as an excuse when I was really just being a coward. Brad didn't move. He let her speak. I'm scared, she continued, eyes brimming now. I'm scared of how much I care about you. I'm scared of screwing this up, of letting you down. I've never done this. Not like this. I don't know how to be in a relationship that's real. She wiped at her face, but the tears were falling faster now. I've spent my whole life proving myself, being strong, staying in control, and suddenly you're here, and it feels different. It feels good, but that makes it feel dangerous, like I might lose it, like I already have. Her voice cracked. I don't want to ruin this. I don't want to lose you. But I need you to know I have a lot of growing to do, and I need you to be patient with me. I need you to call me out when I shut down. Don't let me disappear again. Don't give me space when I ask for it, not when I'm pushing you away. Brad took a step forward, then another, and then, wordlessly, he wrapped his arms around her. She melted into him, the dam fully breaking now as she clung to the only steady thing in her storm. He held her tightly, his voice low in her ear. I understand. She sobbed into his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered. I never was. She pulled back just enough to look up at him, eyes red, nose running, mascara smudged, and still, he looked at her like she was everything. You don't have to be perfect, Rudy. You just have to be honest. That's all I've ever wanted. She nodded, voice too choked to speak. He smiled gently and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. And for the record, he added, I don't want space. I want you. Even when you're messy, especially then. She laughed wetly and buried her face in his shoulder again, and for the first time in her life, Rudy Mason let someone hold her without conditions. Not as a colleague, not as a rising star, not as someone who had it all figured out, just as herself. And Brad? He didn't flinch. He stayed steady and strong, right where she needed him to be. The storm of emotions had passed, the tears had dried, and what lingered now was the kind of silence that didn't demand to be filled, the kind that felt safe. Brad and Rudy curled up together on the sofa, a fuzzy blanket thrown haphazardly over their legs, a half-empty box of Thai takeout on the coffee table. A rom-com played softly on the TV, neither of them really watching it. Brad's arm was draped around Rudy's shoulder, and her head rested against his chest, rising and falling with his breath. You okay? He asked quietly, running his fingers through her hair. She nodded, eyes half closed. More than okay. There was a pause. Then Rudy sat up slightly, reaching for her phone on the coffee table. She stared at the screen for a moment, her thumb hovering, then began typing. To Mr. Baxter. Janice, subject, Simmons case. I'm stepping back. Please reassign the case to Avery or Liang. They're ready, and they'll do great work. I'll be offline through the weekend. Rudy. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then, with a breath of finality, she powered down her phone. Brad raised his eyebrows. You just retired from law? Rudy smirked, sliding back under the blanket beside him. I just remembered I'm allowed to take a break, for once. He smiled. You know I'm proud of you, right? I know, she said, leaning her head back against him. I think I might even be proud of me, too. They watched the rest of the movie in quiet comfort, sharing bites of lukewarm noodles and the occasional sarcastic comment about the plot. Eventually, Rudy's eyes began to drift shut, her hand curled gently in Brad's. The credits rolled. The city outside kept moving, but inside that cozy apartment, nothing needed fixing. Nothing needed chasing. The woman who once measured her worth in wins and work had finally found something better. Peace, rest, and someone to fall asleep beside. And that night, as Rudy Mason let go of the world, she realized something beautiful. It hadn't fallen apart. It had just waited for her. For the first time in a long time, Rudy felt like her life wasn't just about chasing a goal. It was about enjoying the journey. Months had passed since Rudy first met Brad, but it felt like a lifetime ago. The woman who had reluctantly stepped into that community center, armed with skepticism and a sharp tongue, was almost unrecognizable now. Her work was still important to her, but it no longer defined her completely. There was room for other things now. Family dinners, lazy weekends, piano lessons, and Brad. Their relationship had grown steadily, marked by quiet moments and shared laughter. Brad didn't demand grand declarations or sweeping changes. Instead, he encouraged her with patience and humor, celebrating her small victories as if they were monumental. When Rudy shared how she'd stepped away from a case to let a junior associate lead, his smile was full of pride. "That's what I'm talking about," he said, raising his coffee mug in an impromptu toast, empowering others while taking a step back. Classic work-life balance move. "It wasn't easy," Rudy admitted, swirling her tea. "I had to sit on my hands to stop myself from intervening. But they did well. Better than I expected." "Of course they did," Brad replied, his tone steady. "Because you taught them. You're still leading, Rudy, just in a different way." His words stayed with her, nudging her to rethink the way she approached her role at the firm. Slowly, she began delegating more, mentoring younger associates, and carving out time for herself. Her colleagues noticed the change, though they didn't always understand it. "Are you okay?" Janice asked one afternoon, her voice tinged with concern. "You've been leaving before 7 o'clock lately. Do you have plans?" Rudy smirked. "I'm fine, Janice. Just trying something new. It's called having a life." The truth was, Rudy did have plans. Brad had introduced her to the idea of date night, and though she'd initially balked at the predictability of it, she found herself looking forward to their evenings together. Whether it was trying a new restaurant, going for a hike, or simply watching a movie on his lumpy couch, being with Brad felt effortless. Her relationship with her family blossomed as well. Lily had invited her to a pottery class, which Rudy reluctantly agreed to. She quickly discovered she was terrible at it, but the experience was worth every laugh and every teasing comment from her sister. "See?" Lily said, holding up her own wobbly creation. "Sometimes it's not about being perfect. It's about having fun." Rudy smiled, her hands covered in clay. "I'm starting to get that." That Thanksgiving, as Rudy sat at her parents' dining table, surrounded by her family, she realized just how much her life had changed. The space she'd once filled with work was now brimming with moments like these, moments that felt real and irreplaceable. Brad was by her side, fitting seamlessly into the fold. Her father had already taken to calling him kid, while her mother insisted he help with the dishes. As Brad joked with her family, Rudy felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Later that evening, as they walked to their car, Brad slipped his arm around her shoulders. "So," he said, his tone light but thoughtful, "how does it feel to have this much balance in your life?" Rudy leaned into him, her breath visible in the crisp night air. "It feels perfect." Brad smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You're just getting started." And for the first time in years, Rudy wasn't thinking about her next case, her next deadline, or her next promotion. She was thinking about now, about the people she loved, and about the life she was building. One balanced, beautiful moment at a time. As December rolled in, Brad surprised her with tickets to a winter retreat in the mountains. "Think of it as an extension of class," he teased, "but with fewer slides and more hot chocolate." Rudy hesitated at first. Taking a few days off felt indulgent, and there was still work to be done at the firm. But when Janice insisted she'd handle things, and Mr. Baxter gave her a knowing nod, Rudy let herself say yes. The retreat was nestled in a snow-covered valley, its cozy cabins illuminated by strings of fairy lights. Rudy and Brad spent their days hiking through frost-kissed forests, sipping cocoa by the fire, and talking about everything and nothing. It was during one of these quiet moments, with the fire crackling softly in the background, that Brad turned to her. "Do you ever think about the future?" he asked, his tone casual but his gaze steady. Rudy set her mug down, her fingers lingering on the warm ceramic. "I used to think about it all the time," she admitted. "But it was always about work, what I'd achieve, where I'd be in 5 years. Now I think about things I never did before: family, connection, balance." Brad smiled, leaning closer. "And does that future Include me? Rudy's breath caught, but there was no hesitation in her answer. I hope so. Brad reached for her hand, his smile widening. I think we make a pretty good team. Back in the city, Rudy returned to her routine with a newfound clarity. Her career was still important to her, it always would be, but it no longer consumed her. She delegated more, mentored younger associates, and even started a wellness initiative at the firm inspired by Brad's teachings. To her surprise, it was met with enthusiasm. You're like a whole new person, Janice remarked one day as Rudy headed out at 5 o'clock sharp. What's your secret? Rudy grinned. Just good advice and better company. By summer, Rudy and Brad moved into a cozy townhouse together, their lives intertwining in ways that felt natural and inevitable. Brad brought his sense of adventure, filling their weekends with impromptu road trips and long bike rides, while Rudy found joy in teaching him how to cook, even if his attempts at lasagna were more comedic than culinary. One warm evening, as they sat on their back porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Rudy turned to Brad. You know, she said, her voice soft, I used to think my life had to be all about proving myself. But now, I feel like I've already won. Brad wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. That's because you figured out the real secret, he said, kissing her temple. The best victories aren't the ones you win alone. As the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Rudy realized how far she'd come, from a woman who measured her worth in accomplishments to someone who found joy in the people and moments that truly mattered. Her journey wasn't over. It never would be. But for the first time in years, she felt ready for whatever came next. And with Brad by her side, she knew it would be worth every step. The end. Hope you enjoy listening to Green Tea Tales. Help our channel to grow by likes, shares, and subscribe. Thank you.